It's not often that we get to open up a show with a little bit of breaking news. That two-sport superstar Tim Tebow has decided to call it quits in baseball. Yeah, we're probably not going to talk about that, but we'll talk about other things.
You mean?
All right, welcome to the Zero Technique Football Podcast. I am your co-host Ryan Stern. Joined with me, as always, Derek Mountain. Derek, this is shocking news that we just found out that Tim Tebow's retiring from baseball.
So you mean the career 190 hitter in the minor leagues who's 33?
Hey, 223.
Oh, my bad. Oh,
yeah, 223.
In that case, especially in the new analytics age, that might as well be 300. I'm shocked by that personally. Absolutely shocked.
I mean, he would probably want to give his strikeout average, which was about 374, instead of his batting average, which was 223. So, yeah.
I respect the hustle, I guess. It was just, I always thought it was a weird move. Why?
But I mean, he did it the right way, though. He did the bus rides. He did the regular.
He did it for 3 years, right?
4 years. 2016 through 19. Yeah.
Oh man, I would do it for a year just to say I did it, and then call it quits. Yeah. But more power to him, I guess.
Yeah. So we are with backsportspage.com. Make sure you're checking out the page. We have some amazing things coming up for the NFL draft season. Got some great writers, a great plan that is going to be laid out in the next week or so. I am really looking forward to what Backsports Page is going to be able to bring everyone for draft season coming up. Follow them on all social medias at Backsports Page. So how we're going to handle the next couple of weeks is we're going to go in draft order. We're going to look at each team and how they're going to handle the upcoming offseason. We're going to look at the cap space that they have. We're going to look at the free agents that were on their roster last year that they could lose this year. Players that they may look at in free agency, and also some places that they may look in the draft. So we're going to go in draft order. We're going to try and get about 6 teams a week. So this week will be the top 6. So we got the Jaguars, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Falcons, the Bengals, and the Eagles. But before we get into that, we are going to open up with 2 little bits of news. And the first one was something that we've been talking about for quite some time. And that was the inevitable release of J.J. Watt with the Houston Texans. They are in cap hell, which is awful for a team that is as bad as they look on paper. So J.J. Watt, and it's going to save him, I think $17 million on the cap this year. And to me, there's only really 2 logical places for him to go, because it's not going to be about the money. To me, it's all about Green Bay, where he grew up, or Pittsburgh with his brothers.
That's interesting. I think there are a couple other teams that I would keep an eye on. I mean, just cycling back, if you're Houston, why wouldn't you try to get a 3rd rounder or something for him? I know you want to grant him his wish. He's never hit the market before, but you could still trade him to a contender, get something for him, and try to at least make amends with all the picks you've lost.
Right.
I always thought that was weird. Honest, I thought that was a weird move.
I think that this was them granting his wish.
Then why not grant Deshaun Watson's wish?
because Deshaun Watson is 25 years old and a quarterback.
Yeah.
That's why.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, you still could have traded him to Green Bay or whoever for, I'm sure, third or fourth. Like those teams would have easily paid that price for sure. Win now teams would easily do that.
But not with the contract that he had. Now that
That's true. That's true.
Now they'll be able to negotiate with a brand new contract. This was something that, and you know that the Houston Texans were a huge part of J.J. Watt's identity. He absolutely loved the city, and with what he did after Hurricane, was it Maria, I believe?
Yep. And Harvey too.
Yeah, the relief funds that he was able to get together and raise. I mean, I think it was well over $30 million. Was just absolutely unbelievable. He is an icon in that town, and this was about paying him back. With this, like you said, this is now going to be the first time that he's really hit free agency, and so I know I had said Green Bay and Pittsburgh. What are other teams that you could see him going to?
I mean, I agree with you. I think it's the first time he's hit the market. He's made over $100 million just in terms of contract earnings. I mean, that's not including endorsements. So I do think any team that's going to get him, it's going to be a 1 or 2 year deal for maybe around a $10 or $12 million base, which is honestly a pretty frugal price for how productive he still is. He's not the game wrecker that he once was, but he's still versatile. He's still insanely athletic, insanely strong. He can play the 3 tech. He can play the 5. He can play on the outside. To me, I look at Buffalo. They need edge help badly. I think he could be really disruptive at the 3 tech and passing downs too. And I think they need pass rush help. They need immediate pass rush help right now. And they're not necessarily in a draft slot where you're guaranteed to get anything. I would look at Buffalo, and I would look at Cleveland. And there was a report from Mary Kay Cabot, the beat writer of the Browns on ESPN. Can you imagine him and Myles Garrett? I mean, I know the thought is going to a division rival against his 2 brothers, TJ and Derek, in Pittsburgh, but they're way more ready to win now than Pittsburgh in my eyes. As long as Ben Roethlisberger is the quarterback at Pittsburgh, that's not enticing to me. They have no chance of winning a Super Bowl. I look at Cleveland; they're only trending up. They have the cap space to make this move and make other moves. And I mean, they need defensive help. You start off with J.J. Watt and Myles Garrett on that D line. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, and both teams, I think, are in position right now to add someone like a J.J. Watt into their system. I know Green Bay is going to have to do a lot to get him, because right now they're projected like $13 million over the cap, so they would have a lot of work ahead of them in order to get him in. Buffalo is pretty close to that cap as it is right now, but Cleveland has about $30 million, and so I mean, they'll be able, if anything is about money, right? They just seem like like they could be a logical landing spot.
I mean, you kind of put your chips in this year's basket, right? Because the cap's going to grow exponentially next year, at least what we're expecting. But if you're Cleveland and you're trying to make a push, and I think what's a winnable division now. I think it's really them and Baltimore, the top dogs, with Pittsburgh behind them. But that move just makes a lot of sense to me. And, I mean, on Houston, he had no help. He was double-teamed on 30% of snaps. I mean, it looked like a really sad and tough situation for him last year, and he has been derailed by injury in the past.
Yeah.
You give him some help, and he's a complimentary rusher at another place. That's all I want to see. I want to see him be the second option somewhere at a contender. I think that'll be really fun.
Absolutely. And the other bit of news that we're going to get into before we hit up the off-season outlook for some of these teams is the news that the TV deals look like they're about to be renegotiated. I know you were bringing it up before the game, so why don't you let us know what you had heard?
Yes, reported on Monday on NBC Sports that the NFL might come to an agreement within a month, and that the next 10 years of TV deals is imminent, and that the aggregate value could be as much of an increase as 100% from the last TV deal, anywhere from 70 to 100%. So why does that matter? It could have a big impact on the cap this year. A lot of teams have been bracing for a huge reduction in the cap, as low as 180 million. I think the new reports are somewhere around 185 million. This could put a wrench into that, and it could be closer to the 190, 198 mark. We're at 198 in the 2020 salary cap. So this is great news for teams that are flooding in cap hell. I think 13 or 14 teams are projected over the cap at $185 million cap, what we're expecting. So whatever happens, it's gravy for some of those teams, because some teams are in a real mess in the upcoming months.
Yeah, I'm looking at right now, and I'm seeing 11 teams that are projected over the cap at 185, including the Saints. And I know I'm not sure if this has the restructuring of Drew Brees' contract in it or not, but right now the Saints are 65 million over the cap. I mean, how does that happen?
Free agent Marcus Williams is a free agent. I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a free agent. They're going to have to figure out quarterback. I guess it's going to be Jameis from reports, but it's like this team might not make the playoffs next year. We'll get into it. It's at another week, but I mean, they can't get better. I mean, that was kind of their window. I don't know if people realize that, but that was kind of their window.
Yeah. So obviously, right now, I think the teams that this news affects the most are the teams that are at the top. So the Jaguars, the Colts, the Jets, the Patriots. They seem like they had such a huge advantage over everybody else in terms of being able to offer these free agents a more lucrative contract in order to get them in. Now, if we're going to see a projected increase in the salary cap, now maybe some of these middle of the pack teams, they'll have that extra cash to spend and maybe be able to entice some of these other guys.
We'll have to brace ourselves for. It's already starting. Is these teams that are over the cap, they're going to have to make really tough decisions, cut those productive 28 to 30-year-old guys. That's going to save them a lot of money right now. And we saw it in Denver. AJ Boye got cut, and we saw it today in Carolina. Quan Short got cut. Two very good football players. I think a lot of really good middle-of-the-pack guys who might be a little past their prime are going to be in the free agent market. It's going to be a really rich market. And I think there are going to be a lot of 1 and 2 year prove-it deals, and it's going to be a lot of incentive-based stuff where these guys are probably going to have to take a lot less money than what they're accustomed to, but it's going to make for a really talented free agent pool.
That it will. All right, so let's get into the off-season outlook for the NFL teams. We've got teams 1 through 6 in terms of draft order. So we're going to open up with the Jaguars.
The first pick, they hold LA's first round pick. They have the most cap space, as Ryan acknowledged, at $79 million. And their upcoming free agents are DJ Hayden, Tyler Eifert, and Cam Robinson at left tackle.
And obviously the needs that they're going to be looking to fill. Obviously, it's going to be quarterback. We know that it's going to be Trevor Lawrence at number 1. So we can scratch that off. Offensive tackle is going to be a big thing for them. I can see that being a major focus, and in even the guards too, just all throughout the line. You're going to be investing so much money and he's now the new face of the franchise. You're going to have to do whatever you can to fix that offensive line and keep him upright. We've seen quarterbacks with bad offensive lines, Daniel Jones, struggle at times because when they don't have the offensive line performing in front of them, it just slows down the progress.
I totally agree. It starts with your franchise quarterback. I think priority number one has to be re-signing Cam Robinson. He's been a little bit of a disappointment since he came to the league until this year. He had a nice year this year. I don't think you just let homegrown tackles walk that are productive. Juwan Taylor on the right side, he had high hopes and he kind of fell into their hands in the second round. I totally agree with you. I think they have to look at just venturing maybe best player available on the offensive line after that first pick. I think it wouldn't hurt them to look at his surrounding cast. I think the receivers are a strong point of this team. I like DJ Chark. I like Laviska Shenault. Chris Conley's a free agent. Keelan Cole's a free agent. But looking at those middle rounds, a guy like Rondale Moore, Amari Rodgers at Clemson, add a little more juice to this lineup could only help Trevor Lawrence. I mean, and they're going to have a void at tight end. I don't expect them to bring back Tyler Eifert. I just don't. He's a guy who's been derailed by a ton of injuries. Unless they aren't confident in what they have, or they aren't going to prepare to draft someone, I just don't see a reason to bring him back. So to me, and I'm looking at what the NFL is now, which is offense. Offense wins you games. You have to score to win to get in the playoffs. The Jags were 30th in scoring offense. And this may be a theme. We'll walk through the other teams. Jets were 32nd. Bengals were 29th. Eagles were 26th in scoring offense. I mean, there's a reason these teams were bad. They can't score. So if I'm the Jags, I am going all in on offense. Best player available after Lawrence, best player available on the offensive line, looking to continue to fortify my core, looking at tight end. I'm not necessarily worried about running back with James Robinson, and we've talked about this, but it's an expendable position, and it's someone who was really productive there. There's no reason to really waste a mid-round pick there, in my opinion.
And the one good thing, though, about being in their position is that, as awful as a destination had seemed in the past with Jacksonville, having Trevor Lawrence there is going to be a selling point for some of these pass catchers, especially the younger ones who have either played with or against him in college, or are just looking to get in a better position. And the one that really sticks out to me is former Jacksonville Jaguar Allen Robinson. He's been stuck with the mediocre that's putting it kindly, quarterback play in his career with Blake Bortles, Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles. I think that there are going to be other teams that that are, I guess, closer to winning now, that'll be able to reach out to Robinson and may sway him away. And maybe he has some hurt feelings or bad blood with how things ended in Jacksonville that could sway him away. But that would be, I mean, that's an ultimate. But I actually think the pass catching group is pretty good in Jacksonville.
I would actually look at Chris Godwin personally. I love Allen Robinson, but I would look at Godwin. He's younger. It's probably going to be more expensive, but they have the money. They have the opportunity to throw a bunch of money at him. And I feel like he complements Chark and Shenault. He can move inside or out. He's not necessarily a master or unbelievable at any one spot, but he doesn't have a clear weakness either. He's fast.
Right.
He's good at the catch point. He's good after the catch. He's physical. I mean, and he's a tone setter. I know Tampa Bay has already expressed that they're going to bring him back, Bruce Arians, Jason Light, but I don't know if they can bring back him, Shaq Barrett, Ndamukong Suh, all these guys. Antonio Brown, Levante David. I don't know if it's feasible. I think Godwin's probably at the top of their list with Shaq Barrett. But, I mean, they're going to have to make a tough decision one way or another. I would make a real push for Godwin. It's not a hard move. I mean, he goes from Tampa to Jacksonville. He's going to be the number one guy. I think that would be intriguing. The only thing that makes me not excited about Jacksonville is Urban Meyer. And we saw with Chris Doyle last week. I mean, that was just embarrassing. But, I mean, he had vetted him, Shad Khan, and Trent Baalke had vetted Chris Doyle. And he was unemployed for 8 months. He gets an NFL job. That was embarrassing. It's a really bad look. I know he resigned, but it's just a terrible look. In a league that's 70% black, I mean, how tone deaf, how insensitive can it get? And Mike Florio, whatever opinion you have of him, and I disagree with a lot of the things he says, but he put it perfectly. Urban Meyer cannot run this like he thinks it's a college program. He could get away with a lot more at these college programs, get a lot more power. You're going to be held accountable at the pro level.
Yep.
I mean, that was an unacceptable move.
Yeah, and we've expressed these worries with Urban Meyer over the past couple of weeks. It wasn't a move that both of us were awfully thrilled about, but he was the biggest name that was available, and it was I think the staple that led to making sure that Trevor Lawrence wasn't going to demand a trade or demand to not be picked by Jacksonville. So, all right, so let's move on to number 2, and obviously this is where the draft begins, and there are so many questions about the New York Jets and how these next 2.5 months are going to play out, because the Jets are going to look remarkably different next year than they did this past season. I think both of us expect some sort of trade, whether it be a trade for a Deshaun Watson, whether it be trading away a Sam Darnold and using the number 2 pick on a quarterback, or trading away the number 2 pick to acquire more assets from a quarterback needy team, if they do decide to hang on to Sam Darnold. So what's the state of the New York Jets as we head into the offseason?
Pick, as you said, they have the Seattle first-round pick from the Jamal Adams trade. They got Darnold, who they can use some leverage. They got the second most cap, $75 million. Their notable free agents are Patrick Onwuasu, Marcus May, and Pat Elflein.
Yeah. 3 guys that are not necessarily cornerstone players for the team. So I think they're going to be looking outside the organization during free agency. And what are they going to do at quarterback is the biggest question of them all.
I did some research today, so I think we're both going to agree, and I think a lot of people would agree, that Lawrence is probably going to be a starting caliber quarterback. I mean, I know we have some people have very lofty expectations of him being that generational type quarterback, but 2 through 4, it's so volatile. Every pundit has a different kind of ranking of those next 3 guys. So I went through the last 10 drafts of quarterbacks drafted. So I was pretty generous in who constituted as a starting caliber quarterback or a fringe guy. So in the last 10 years drafted, I calculated personally that I thought there were about 31 starting quarterbacks that were drafted in the last 10 years, dating back to 2011. 19 of them went in the first round. So do the quick math, that's about 2 a year. I think as we have grown smarter, and over the last couple of years, last 2-3 years, it's been a lot higher. The hit rate's been a lot higher. Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Josh Allen, Lamar, Baker, all those guys. So I think scouts are getting better. We're learning a lot, but it's not a guarantee that these next 3 quarterbacks are going to be starting quality guys. It's not. Don't count your chickens if you're a fan of one of these teams and you draft one of these guys. It's not a guarantee that they're gonna be franchise guy. So, I mean, I think it's really interesting who the Jets elect to do, or if they elect to stick with Darnold.
So I was going to save this stat for when we got to the Eagles, but it sort of plays into what you just brought up. From the drafts between 2009 and 2016, there were 22 quarterbacks taken in the first round. How many of those quarterbacks are still with that team that drafted them?
That's it.
Carson Wentz is it. It was
in the first round. Jake Locker, Blake Bortles, E.J. Manuel, like just awful picks. And I don't think people realize that. I mean, and I don't think Darnold's awful, but he's the guy who's unproven, right? You know what I mean? It's not a guarantee. He was a third pick. So between Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, the math says that one of them, maybe two of them, are going to be average to above average starters. I mean, that's just what it says. So it's going to be really interesting. Everybody has different opinions on all three of those guys.
Yeah, and I have a feeling. Obviously, I don't think that it's going to end with those four. Where I really do think that the magic number is 5.5. I do think Mac Jones is going to be taken in the first round, and then you get the big question: does the quarterback 6? Does somebody try and trade up into the end of the round the way that Baltimore did with Lamar Jackson to gain that extra year of eligibility? And I think odds are that it would be Kyle Trask to be that quarterback 6. But all right, so with the Jets, so again, quarterback we've been talking about with Darnold, the big name that has been thrown around, and in fact, it's teams 2 and 3 that seem to be the most likely landing spot should a trade happen would be for Deshaun Watson. Is there any way that this can happen with either of these two teams?
To know for the Jets. My only reason, and of course, I think they would love the opportunity to have Deshaun, but I also think they're hitting the reset button. I think Salah and Joe Douglas are trying to build their own thing. I think that they have accumulated a lot of these picks. They're in a great spot in terms of cap space. They have security for 4 or 5 years. And yes, Deshaun Watson's a way to make you relevant, but also it wouldn't be any different than Houston. They would have to get rid of all that draft capital. He would go into another dire situation in New York. So I'm not necessarily sure that's in the cards for them, where they could get their own quarterback at 2. They mold him. They make him theirs. And they go from there. I mean, they have another first-round pick. They can use Darnold to leverage. They got the 34th pick. So they have a lot going for them. To me, I think they look all on offense similar to the Jags. I mean, that was, I know Adam Gase had a pretty big hand in how abysmal they were offensively last year, but they got to be best player available in just about every spot. They got Mekhi Becton, who you should be really excited about. But they got to look at right tackle, especially bringing in Mike McDaniel from San Fran as their OC. Having game-changing tackles in that wide zone scheme, I mean, life becomes a lot easier to execute that offense. So I would not be surprised if they were looking at a tackle at 23, just how deep this tackle class is. So that's something I'm looking out for. A guy like Samuel Cosme, Darisaw from Virginia Tech, one of those guys, Eichenberg from Notre Dame. I would keep my eye on one of those guys, eyeing their future right tackle. I'm curious to see what they do with Darnold. I really don't think they hang on to him. I just don't. I think they're going to hit the reset button. If they were to hang on to those picks, they trade Darnold, who do you think they'll take it to at quarterback?
Right now, I think it would be a Zach Wilson. From everything that I'm hearing, the NFL seems to love Zach Wilson a lot more than they love Justin Fields. And again, when there's smoke, there's fire. I think there's a lot of the draft nicks that are out there that are saying, oh, well, Justin Fields should be in competition with Trevor Lawrence for QB1. And the more people I hear that are actually in the NFL realm have Justin Fields as QB3, maybe even QB4. That the love affair with Justin Fields is not there the way that the draft community is. And right now, I think that if Sam Darnold is not the answer or is not the option for the Jets in 2021, I think that, and because, hey, there's also a chance that Dak Prescott hits the open market. And I think if Prescott hits the open market, I think that's a landing spot for him.
They have the juice to do it. They have the money to throw 40, 45 million at him right now. That would be interesting. That would make them they could go for Sewell too, if that was the case. And that changes everything for them in terms of the draft. I'm also looking at them taking a receiver for sure. Rashad Perriman is also a free agent. I think they like what they saw in Mims, but he's not necessarily a number one option. I think they'll be eyeing guys like Allen Robinson, Galladay, Godwin in free agency. And at 23 or 34, this is another deep wide receiver class. A guy like Rashad Bateman, if he were to fall 23, that's a slam dunk. So it'll be interesting. I think Crowder's also a free agent. So, they got some tough decisions to make. But I kind of like where the Jets are at. I think they're in a decent spot to make some noise and be competitive next year. I'm not saying they're going to contend for a playoff spot. I don't think that'll happen, but I think they're definitely going the right direction with Salah and with how manageable their cap situation is. They're going to be so flexible. I love what Joe Douglas been doing, especially the way he drafted last year. So I like what the Jets are doing.
And there's another team in the AFC East that took major steps forward this past year, and they're now picking at number 3 because thank you, Bill O'Brien. And so the Miami Dolphins
to talk about tonight.
Yeah. The Miami Dolphins, who had a chance at the playoffs on the very last game of the year. They were the only team that needed a win of the 5 that ended up losing week 17. And hence they found themselves on the outside looking in. But this is a team that has, I think, championship aspirations over the next 2 years. What's the state of the Miami Dolphins?
Third pick, they have their home pick at 18. They got the Texans' second-round pick, 36, from the Tunsil trade. They got their own second-round pick at 50. So they got 4 picks in the top 50 coming off a 10-6 season. That is rich. They got $35 million in cap space. Their upcoming free agents, only guys of note, Ryan Fitzpatrick and starting center Ted Karras. So pretty good situation out of Miami.
That's a great situation to where you're only looking to fill, I guess, a backup quarterback role and a center role, which can be filled anywhere from that second pick in the second round to the 4th round. We've seen plenty of centers get drafted in that area and go on to have success pretty quickly also. This is a team that Deshaun Watson makes a ton of sense.
I think it's them or Carolina with how aggressive they are and kind of the young pieces on their team. But Miami, they have the picks to do it. They have a nice core in place where they don't have to tear down their entire team to do it. I think it's a team that Deshaun Watson would come in open arms. that's a team that's ready to win now. They were top 5 in scoring defense last year. And, I mean, Tua's enticing. He was a top 5 pick last year. I think he's an enticing piece. You throw him in the number 3 pick. That's a lot more than a lot of teams can offer.
Yeah, absolutely. They probably have the draft capital that the Texans are looking for in a return package for Deshaun Watson. Now and especially because they also have the Tua factor. There's if you tell the Texans, hey, we've got a 23-year-old quarterback that already has a couple games under his belt, he's on his way up, and you're also going to have the number 3 pick to help him out, because then you can turn that into Tua and potentially a Penei Sewell. I mean that would have to spark my interest.
To the rebuild, and they would get a lot more. I still think they would get another first rounder in there, another pick, like a second, maybe 2 seconds, another player, a decent player, starter. I mean, it wouldn't end there, but yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the best place for Houston to start over if that's what they elect to do. I mean, I don't think any other teams besides the Jets, but I think where Miami is, they can be a lot more aggressive than New York. It's not. They can take this risk. They have the championship defense in place, so I'm intrigued to see what they do. If they do hang on, though, I think it's a layup pick. I think it's Penei Sewell.
See, I had Sewell for a couple weeks, just locked right into that slot. I don't know. I as much as I know how deep the wide receiver class is this year, but I think right now what you need to do is surround Tua with weapons that can help him develop. To be honest, I wasn't impressed a whole lot with Tua, and I wasn't the biggest Tua fan going into the draft. I mean, I had him as my QB3. I had Herbert ahead of him. So Tua was not my not my cup of tea, and he didn't was it of the past for rookie quarterbacks, the last 51 rookie quarterbacks that threw at least 100 passes in their rookie season. Tua Tagovailoa ranked 51st in terms of yards per completion.
How I would combat that is look at his team, but then you look at Fitzpatrick and his productivity in there, and I think it is different. I do think Chan Gailey called a completely different game when Tua was in there. I kind of think he didn't let it rip, and I kind of think they were really cautious with him coming off that hip surgery. I really do. It was a lot of catch it, shape it, throw it. It was a lot of 3-step, a lot of screens. Didn't really throw the football down the field. They didn't really make an effort to move the pocket with him. And I mean, it makes sense. He was 6 months off what could be deemed as a career-ending injury, what some thought. So I'm not giving up on Tua. I'm not the biggest fan either in terms of just what he presents, in terms of measurables, arm talent, stuff like that. But he still has top 5 draft capital. I think he has a lot of upside next year with an offseason in the weight room, an offseason of mini camps and coaching, and a year in the system. And hopefully they bring in a brighter, more vibrant, modern offense for Tua. I agree with your sentiment. I think they go all in on offense. We can agree on that for the draft, for sure. But the reason I think it's Sewell is, one, he's fragile. I think it's a good place to start the O-line. And 2, the drop-off between Sewell and who's going to be there at 18 to tackle is a lot bigger than Jamar Chase or Devonta Smith and a Bateman or Kadarius Toney or whoever your cup of tea is. But to me, there's still going to be talent in the second and third round. There's still a ton of talent in the free agent pool at wide receiver. So I think you go Sewell, you have Austin Jackson on the other side, your 29 or the 2020 first round pick, and move Robert Hunt into guard where he naturally should be. Yeah. And that's 3 top 2 round picks within the last 2 years. That's something you can build around. The one guy I think they should go after, I say they should go all offense. The one guy I think that they should eye at 18 if they stay there is Micah Parsons. I love that fit.
I don't see there's any way. I don't see any way Parsons slips all the way down there.
Field issues. Bucky Brooks has brought that to light. He had his problems at Penn State with that kid. I forget who it was, but him and Yetur Gross-Mateos were kind of at the forefront of a assault case of one of their players that he forced to transfer. So there are some question marks. If he's not a culture fit, then yeah, that's something that Flores and Chris Greer will decide. But in terms of fit, schematically, at inside linebacker and a need for them, and how much they blitz, and if you just watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how they employed Devin White, that's where I'm thinking. It's just a blitzing inside backer that can rush the passer like Parsons could be scary in Miami.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
That's another. I mean, that's probably more realistic because I think they'll have to get lucky for Parsons to be there at 18. Yeah. I agree, but I mean, they're in such a good spot. These are like luxury picks to them. They could trade back to if they want. I mean, this draft, 20 to 60, the guys slotted in 20 to 60 in certain spots are going to be really good football players. So they're in such a good spot. It's going to be really interesting to do. They kind of could be the most aggressive team if they want, especially in terms of Watson.
Yeah. So we had a comment a couple minutes ago when we were talking about the New York Jets, and co-host of the fantasy show that the three of us do during the season, Tom Bennett, Penei Sewell.
I mean, if Darnold's our guy, sure, but I mean, I don't see it. I don't.
I only see it if they decide to hang on to Darnold. I just don't see them hanging on to Darnold and the number 2 pick. I just think that there's going to be too much because that's going to be, everyone knows Lawrence is going number 1. Who's the next guy off the board? If you want to make sure that you get your guy, you got to get to number 2. And so I just don't see. And maybe it's the Falcons at number 4. Maybe they want to make sure and they go up to number 2. And maybe and the Dolphins take a wide receiver at number 3, and Sewell falls into their lap at 4. Maybe obviously, I think if it's either the Lions or the Panthers, there's no way Sewell will be there at 7 or 8. So I just find it tough to believe that it'll be a mathematical match for Sewell and the Jets. All right, moving on to the 4th pick, and boy, this is a team that has a lot of work ahead of them. The Atlanta Falcons have a lot that they have to fix, and not a lot of money to do it with.
The 4th worst cap situation in all football. They are a projected $23 million over the cap right now. Their projected free agents are center Alex Mack, Todd Gurley, Keanu Neal, and DeMonte KZ at safety.
Yeah, Gurley's gone, right? I mean, there's zero chance that Todd Gurley is. Yeah, there's zero chance that Todd Gurley is a member of this team next year. I'm having a tough time finding a landing spot for Todd Gurley as a starting running back. I just don't see it anymore. He's going to have to try and find a team that either gets an injury like what Devonta Freeman did last year, where find a team that has an injury to latch onto, or find a team that is willing to be a part of a committee. But this is a team that has a lot of work to do and not a lot of money to do it with. There's obviously going to be some cap casualties with this team. Who do you think are some of the leading candidates?
He is offensive guard James Carpenter. I think he's a cap hit of $8 or $9 million they could save right off the bat. I don't think he's in their plans next year. After that, it gets muddy because Matt Ryan and Julio Jones eat up so much of their cap. It's insane. So after that, I mean, they would be getting rid of some good football players. If you want to go down Jake Matthews, that route, guys who, and I think as we alluded to earlier in the show, some of these teams are going to have to cut really good players. That's just what's going to happen to get under the cap again. But I think the one guy that I would be confident in that they cut is James Carpenter.
Yeah, Ricardo Allen is probably the guy that, I mean, he would give them a savings of $6.25 million. And again, he's another one that just can't seem to stay on the field. Well, I mean, you look at anybody on especially in that secondary last year, they were down to like their cornerback 10 at one point.
They're interesting. So Arthur Blank, their owner, put it, I think, perfectly. He said, we're not a 4-win team. We're going to be the fourth pick. We're 4-12. We're not a 4-win team, but we're definitely not a playoff team either. We're probably somewhere in between. I mean, the way they lost the Cowboys game, the Bears game, the Lions game, they were reinventing ways how to lose football games in the National Football League that we've never seen before. I mean, you could attribute it to game management, bad luck, whatever, a combination of everything. But this team is not the fourth worst team in the NFL in terms of talent. I think they're in a decent spot to maybe make a push for that 7th spot if all things align for them. I mean, Matt Ryan gets back in that Shanahan system with Arthur Smith, where he won an MVP in 2016. I think he is an easy bounce back candidate. The interesting spot for them at 4 is, do they pick the next guy behind Ryan? Because they're never going to be in this spot again, at least in the foreseeable future. They're not going to be able to get a top quarterback of this caliber for the next couple of years unless things totally implode. So, I mean, to me, I think the decision's easy. I would look at quarterback at number 4, especially with given their cap situation.
Yeah, right now is the time that you need to strike. You need to get that quarterback on a rookie. How many teams are finding success while their quarterback is on their rookie deal? It just offers up so much more options that you can do with the rest of the roster when you're not spending $35-40 million on one position. If they decide to go the route of the quarterback, whether it be a Zach Wilson, a Justin Fields, who I know a lot of people are going to put the Georgia the factor in there that he just makes sense for the Falcons, whether it be a Trey Lance. What do they do with Matt Ryan? Because if they do go after that guy, if they do go after their quarterback of the future, they're going to be paying him. If they what's the number 4 is around $8 million a year, I believe. And then adding that, then adding that to what Matt Ryan is making, it's going to make things a little difficult. Should they decide to hold on to Matt Ryan?
Structure him and save up to $15 million this year.
I
think
there has to be a restructuring with Matt Ryan.
At the post June 1st designation next year. I mean, this year it's not even a possibility. It's just so astronomical. But I think next year, I think the dead cap hit would be, I just looked at it, like $17 million, $15 million. That's not, I mean, it's horrible, but we just saw Jared Goff get moved and his cap hit's $23 million. So, I mean, anything's possible in this new NFL. And I think we're all expecting the cap to grow somewhere between 220, 225 million next offseason. So a lot of teams could make really aggressive moves like that next year. So I think they already announced that Matt Ryan's their quarterback for next year, and he has to be. There's just no choice there. The only concern you have with sitting a rookie quarterback, a top 5 pick, is you're wasting those rookie year deals where he could be getting experience, he could be playing, and you're just wasting $8 million, like you said, on the bench. But they have so many holes in terms of defense too. I mean, defensive line besides Grady Jarrett, it's so dire. They haven't been able to find a steady dose of edge pressure since Vic Beasley led the league in sacks in 2016, which was really a fluke. They tried to kind of patch on Band-Aids like Tack McKinley, who was a bust of the first-round pick. Dante Fowler is just a disaster of a contract from last offseason. So, and if they don't go that direction at quarterback, maybe they trade down and they pick an edge like Azeez Ojulari or someone that they like, or someone in the second round, because there's no really premium edge player that we've been kind of accustomed to the last few years, like a Chase Young or a Nick Bosa. Nobody of that stature. But like you said, this is not going to be an easy fix for Atlanta. This is going to be a long rebuild.
So I was actually discussing this with somebody that I was working with who's a big football fan, and we were talking about the draft. What number pick in the draft does the first defensive player come off this year?
Ooh, that's a good question. My bet would be, I would say 8 or 9. I would say 8 at Carolina, just because Rule's a defensive coach. I think 9.
They spent their entire draft last year on the defensive side of the ball.
I don't know. I think he wants to be a defensive-minded team, and that's where their identity is. I think 9 safely. If Denver doesn't trade out of it, just because they literally have no corners, they could get the corner of their choice at number 9 in a very good corner class.
See, I think that Denver is sneaky in the quarterback discussion this year.
Or going outside number 7.
And so, to be honest, I think that there's a decent chance that number 10, Dallas, could be the first spot that we see. I don't see Dallas has to draft defense. They must draft defense. They will pick defense, so it will not be after 10, but it's tough to really look at any of those top 9 teams and say, oh yeah, well they're definitely going to draft defense, especially with like you said, and I don't know if it's necessarily because it's top heavy in terms of offensive. I just think that we don't have any elite defensive players in this draft.
The top 3 corners, to each their own. Whoever, I mean, I think kind of like those quarterbacks 2 through 4. Each guy is a different ranking, but they're all really good corners. But none of them are of a Jalen Ramsey class in terms of physical traits. At least maybe Caleb Farley, but he didn't play this year, and he doesn't have the tape of a Jalen Ramsey. So none of them warrant that top 5 pick. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, you're completely right. No. I think the interior D-line landscape is really bleak, too.
Yep.
After Christian Barmore, it's really not much.
The crazy thing is that Barmore didn't even start for his college team, and he's going to be the first defensive tackle taken.
He's going to make a team really happy in that mid first round range, but he's not going to be a top 10 pick. There's just no way. I don't see it. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point.
All right. Number 5 is the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you are looking for a team that is praying that teams trade up for quarterbacks, so that one Penei Sewell falls down a couple picks. It is those Cincinnati Bengals. What's the state of the Bengals coming into this offseason?
Picks in the first 4 rounds. They have the 5th best cap situation at a projected $45 million. They have some notable free agents. There's A.J. Green, John Ross, Mackenzie Alexander, William Jackson, and Carl Lawson.
A.J. Green unless he decides to give a hometown discount and say, I just want to play my entire career in one say, he has to be gone. And it's a shame because I loved AJ Green. He was one of my favorite players to watch over the past decade.
People view him as a superstar, but he was so consistent too.
Oh my goodness!
A lot of injuries over the past few years, and he had a really tough year last year. I mean, you could see visibly how frustrated he was. I think he handed the reins over to T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. You're fine there. I think you're receiving course fine.
Absolutely. And I know that I've seen a lot of people try and slot someone like a Jamar Chase into this. The LSU combo with him and Burrow, yes, it makes sense, but it is not what they need to address at number 5. If Penei Sewell isn't there, I don't see the Bengals picking at number 5. I think they trade back. I think that there's even a chance that they could potentially trade up for someone like a Penei Sewell. One, not only because is it going to make you their offensive line was atrocious. The only player that I can see being any good on that line going forward is Jonah Williams. And Jonah Williams' best position...
The other position, they should look for a new guy.
Yeah. Jonah Williams' best position on the offensive line is going to be right tackle. He will be an elite right tackle in the NFL. So if you're able to bring in a Penei Sewell, you're bringing in an elite left tackle. If you move Jonah Williams from left to right, he goes from being a good left tackle to an elite right tackle. Now you have elite bookends for years to come, and it's a starting place. I think they need to do whatever they can do to land someone like the Penei Sewell.
Stop there. I think 2nd, 3rd round, you look in the interior, Wyatt Davis, Trey Smith, Ben Cleveland, guys like that. I mean, they should be drafting minimum 2 or 3 guys on the offensive line and looking hard in free agency. You just can't have Bobby Hart starting at tackle next year. Billy Price has been a failed experiment at center. They signed Quinn Steen. Band-Aids like that are just not going to work. I mean, they're going to have to get homegrown guys to groom with Burrow on this offensive line. In terms of free agency, I mean, they're never a team to spend. Mike Brown is pretty cheap. I think they have to re-sign Carl Lawson. He was a bright spot on that defensive line. He was a great pick in the 4th round. Their secondary was really good last year. I think they got a lot out of Mackenzie Alexander and William Jackson. Jesse Bates is arguably the best free safety in football. The 2nd level at linebacker, I mean, it's just abysmal. They drafted Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither last year. I mean, you groom those guys, but they need some answers at linebacker. It was tough to watch at points. I think to the 2 Cleveland games, just how easily they ran the football on them. But yeah, I mean, it starts in the trenches. I think O-line has to be the top priority. They have to figure out offensive line, at least a future in the offensive line that they can build around Burrow. And that's not a bad place to look at edge and linebacker if I'm looking to fix Cincy. And you said it. If they look at a guy like Jamar Chase at 5, I just think that's everything wrong that they could do with that pick. I think that is just a poor use of a top 5 pick in Cincy.
And to round out the top six, we've got another team that has a lot of work ahead of them, and it is your Philadelphia Eagles. What is the state of the Eagles right now?
I can tell you that it is not good. They have the second worst cap situation in football, and they are projected $41 million over the cap right now. Notable free agents are Jason Peters, Jalen Mills, Mikhail Roby-Coleman. The needs are endless as an Eagles fan. We've heard a lot about the Carson Wentz sweepstakes. I think Ertz is going to be on the move for sure as well. But they got to get creative. I think Ertz was a good lesson for them too. You do not want to be a year late when you trade these aging vets. They've acknowledged that they're finally going to rebuild. I hope Howie actually puts forth some action to do that because he hasn't in years past. But you got to get creative. I think a guy like Darius Slay, who you just got, maybe you look to put him on the market to save some cap. Fletcher Cox, I think teams will pay a lot in terms of draft capital to get him on their team. Teams, I think they're maybe a piece or two away. But yeah, I mean, this is not similar to the Falcons, but I think worse, just looking at their cap and their talent level. It's almost more dire than Atlanta in terms of a rebuild. This has got to be a 2 or 3 year thing at minimum in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I'm looking at guys that, I mean, obviously, Marquise Goodwin has to be a cap casualty. They can get out of that, I think, without any dead cap. But maybe someone even like a Derek Barnett, that's going to be very interesting because they can get out of his contract, I believe, without any cap hit as well. But that
to above average, he's fine. He's a high motor guy. And he's a drafted guy. Those are guys you should want to keep, but because of how poorly they've used the cap, they're probably going to have to get rid of him.
And then it also hampers what you can do in free agency. You can't really go out and go on a spending spree because you're doing whatever it takes to get down to the number you need to get to. A lot of rough days ahead and a lot of restructuring of contracts that I think coming forward for the Eagles. So obviously we're not looking at where they're going to go during free agency. So we got to look at the draft. And I think a lot of it starts with, I think we're assuming that Carson Wentz is gone. We've been reading the tea leaves. We've been hearing all of these rumored teams that are interested in a Carson Wentz. I think that we're at the point where now we can say, okay, he won't be part of this team next year. Does quarterback enter your mind at number 6, or is one of the reasons why you're okay moving off of a Carson Wentz because you think that Jalen Hurts is the guy moving forward?
Couldn't be more 50-50 on Jalen Hurts. I mean, I think if anyone does think he's the guy, they're lying to themselves. I just think nobody knows. I think there are clear flaws in his game. I don't think he presents a ton of upside, but I think there are admirable qualities to like about Jalen Hurts. So to answer your question, they have to consider it. And there are reports that they're considering it. I think Jeff McLean reported it. I saw it on Twitter, but it's something that they're considering once Wentz gets moved. And they have to do their due diligence. It's not a position they figured out. My only problem with it is how he's making the selection, and who's to say that quarterback isn't also going to get ruined by the supporting cast or lack thereof at Philadelphia, just like Carson Wentz. And I think there are a lot of factors that played into it, but that was one of them. I mean, the guy was continuously hurt. They never surrounded him with any type of a near average receiving core. And I do think play calling and stuff like that didn't help him either. But it's something they consider. Absolutely. I would get excited at the prospect of maybe a Trey Lance in Philly, but I'm also just not confident in them surrounding him in an advantageous situation. I'm just not. So
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really give you an answer there, but I mean, they have so many holes. They do. They have so many holes in this team. I don't feel good. The only place where I really feel good about is D line, and that's an aging D line.
Are they
D line down?
Are they a trade down candidate?
Absolutely, they should be. The quickest way, besides restructuring contracts, to kind of make your cap situation more salvageable is to get good, cheap, young talent. I think you trade down, you accumulate more picks and more rookie contracts. That's what they have to do. I mean, unless someone falls in their lap that they love, it's something that they have to consider. And 6 is a great spot for a team to trade up at quarterback. That's still going to be a spot where one of those quarterbacks is probably going to be there. So, I mean, to me, I do think trading down should be a very serious possibility for Philadelphia.
All right, so now that we've had 5 teams taking quarterbacks in the top 6, or trading 4 quarterbacks in the top 6, obviously it's not going to happen that way. How many quarterbacks go in the top 6?
I say Jags, Jets, Falcons, and that's it. I'd say there's a decent chance that a team like the Lions or someone swoop in, or Denver, to trade up at number 6 maybe, or at number 3 maybe with Miami, and get another quarterback. I'd say 3 for sure, maybe 4. I cap it at 4.
Yeah. All right. So if there's 3, so say you had said Jags, Jets, and Falcons, right? So obviously one of them is going to be Penei Sewell. Who else? Who else do we like it in the top 6?
I think in Miami, I like Penei Sewell. If they don't go in that direction, it's going to be a receiver. I mean, I think Devontae Smith is the obvious connection.
The Alabama connection.
I do think that it's a risk taking someone of Smith's stature that high. I love Smith, but I also think you have to take into account his size, how fragile he could be if he were to warrant a high volume of targets. We just haven't seen a lot of guys of his size be kind of ball-dominant receivers. I mean, there's more evidence that those guys can succeed, like a Marquise Brown, like a Darnell Mooney from last year's draft, Tyler Lockett. The only guy that I can really think of that was around 175 pounds that was a dominant guy who got a lot of targets was Marvin Harrison.
Yep.
I mean, other than that, I don't think it's that long a list. So you're kind of drafting a unicorn if you're drafting Devontae Smith that high.
So what if you're not? If the frame is bothering you, if that is a factor in your decision, you can either go with a lot of people have Jamar Chase as the number 1 guy, or you can go with another one of Tua's targets from college, and a Jalen Waddle. And to be honest, before this season, Jalen Waddle was clearly the better prospect in terms of NFL draft status than a Devonta Smith. And now I'm seeing Jalen Waddle falling down to the Giants at number 11 all the time.
I don't think it's going to happen, but something that I would consider. I think Kyle Pitts is a top 5 guy in this draft. I really do. I just don't think I think he is a legitimate generational talent at tight end, and that position should be put at a premium just considering how scarce the tight end pool is in the NFL. The only guys I think are elite are Kelsey, Kittle, and Darren Waller. All those offenses, let's take Kansas City out of it. So we talk about Kittle and Waller, 2 top 10 offenses in terms of scoring offense. And I'm going to go back to 2019 for Jimmy G. I'm not counting this year for San Fran. That's not fair. But in terms of Vegas, top 10 scoring offense, top 10 in terms of yardage with Derek Carr, an average to maybe below average QB talent, I think a tight end of that stature, of that caliber, elevates an offense so much. He's going to be 20 years old by week 1. He's separating from corners and safeties consistently in the SEC every single week. He's good at the catch point. He's a beast after the catch. He's running away from these defensive backs. I mean, I really believe in the right system and a coordinator that knows how to utilize that skill set. Man, he could be so special. I think he could be in that Kelsey tier. He could be in that Waller tier of just an impact, a sheer impact at the tight end spot. I don't think it'll happen, but man, if he were to go to the Eagles, if the Eagles were to trade down and pick him, assuming that they trade Ertz, I would not be angry at all. I mean, I think he's that good.
So since the NFL's merger in 1970, so we're looking at a 50-year span of time. How many tight ends have been drafted in the top 10?
Oh, man, I would say like, how many years is that? So
50 years.
10 years. I'll say 5, I guess.
It's more than that. It's 13, but there's only been 2 in the last. I think 2 in the last 19.
In my lifetime, it's nothing. It's Ebron and Hawkinson, and that's it, right?
Vernon Davis.
Yeah.
So he's the. There's been 2 in the previous 13 years, and 4 since 97. Jeremy Shockey.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's not just a tight end either. I mean, he can play on the outside. He can play in the slot. He can play inline. He can play at the H-back. I mean, he's just a Jenga piece on offense for a good offensive coordinator that knows how to utilize that skill set. I mean, he's just a matchup nightmare. I mean, Hawkinson being a top 10 pick, like, I don't think Hawkinson's a very good tight end. He's easily a top 10 tight end, probably a top 5 kind of guy, but picking him in the top 10, he just doesn't fit that athletic profile to warrant that pick. Kyle Pitts does. Yeah. I mean, 6'6", 245. He's going to be a 4-5 guy.
Yeah.
He's literally Darren Waller in terms of athleticism. I mean, and he's going to be 20 years old. Like, he's going to be 20 years old week 1.
Do you find it funny that the last 2 times a team that a tight end was drafted in the top 10, both of them were the Detroit Lions?
I mean, that's so lying. I mean,
and so that was what? That was 2014, Ebron? Because I think that was the same year as Odell Beckham, and I was actually upset that the Giants drafted that Ebron was taken 2 spots ahead of them at number 10, and they settled for Beckham.
Settled.
Yeah. Oh boy. It just goes to show you how much everybody actually knows when it comes to the draft.
What do you think about Kyle Pitts? Do you think he's a top 10 kind of guy, kind of talent?
I think he's a top 10 talent. Absolutely. Would I like to have seen more games and more from him? I guess a bigger plate that we could look at and say, okay, well, he was able to dominate for 2-3 years at a time. We just don't have we don't have that. Obviously, the physical skill set that he's going to bring to a team is unlike any other pass catcher, because I know there's still a lot of people who don't think that he's going to actually play in line at all in the NFL.
People they just reduce it so much to, oh, he's a tight end, you can't pick him there, and he can't block in line. Okay, you know who blocks in line well, one-on-one with the ends? Gronk, Mercedes Lewis, Kittle. like the list ends there. Like besides that, teams don't ask tight ends to block the ends one-on-one consistently. Might happen a couple times a game to throw in a wrinkle, but like that, I mean, it's way too tough to ask. It's not feasible. So
well, Hawkinson can handle it too.
But like, that's not why you're drafting him.
No.
He shows a desire to block. I mean, he's going to be a feasible blocker at the second level. He's going to be able to slice across the line. I mean, that's all you need him to do. You're not drafting him to be a dominant blocker who can do it all tight end. No, I'm drafting him to be a playmaker.
And he's going to be a physical mismatch no matter who lines up against him. He's either going to be too big or too fast or both.
Travis Kelce's not a bad blocker, but watch the blocks that he makes. It's linebackers, it's slicing across, it's arcing to safeties. He's not one-on-one with the ends every snap.
and you know what? It's not even something. It's something that he can even learn. When George Kittle came into the league, he was known as a below average blocker, and now he's among the top 5 block, and that's including all tight ends, with the tight ends that are only on a team to block. And George Kittle is in the top 5 in terms of blocking tight ends. I only wish Evan Engram had the same coaching staff that George Kittle had. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this week. Next week, we will get into teams drafting 7 through 12. Going to be an interesting one with me trying to break down my Giants next week. This is they need so much, and again, there's so little to work with.
Re-sign Leonard Williams.
Yeah. I think that's if they go after if we're able to re-sign Leonard Williams, I think that takes him out of the Golladay, Godwin, Robinson tier of wide receiver. And if they do go after, if they do sign a Leonard Williams, I think that just automatically cements that they're going to take a pass catcher at number 11 or wherever they end up picking in the first round. So make sure we're tuning in next week. The way you can do that by subscribing on Facebook and on liking on Facebook, subscribing on YouTube, at Backsports page everywhere you go. I'm at rstern33 on Twitter. Derek is at Derek Mountain. We will be joined next week, hopefully, by Jared Zero returning to the podcast. Looking forward to having him back. And again, over the next couple the next 2.5 months, working on some awesome guests that we will be able to bring to you. So for Derek, let's enjoy your week, but stay safe. I know we're both expecting some winter weather over the next couple of hours.
Stay bundled up. Hopefully anyone listening isn't in Texas right now. But yeah, let's do this next week. Week 1 in the books of the off season.
Love it. I can't wait for the draft. I love this so much. All right. All right. Thanks again for watching, and we will be with you next week.